it comes back to terminology as well, because so if somebody says contract system, I always think to myself, well, what does that mean? What do you
Fair
mean by
enough.
that? So what type of contract is that? So when people have contract systems, do they talking about DocuSign or Adobe Sign or some sort of signature package? Probably not. They just call that their e-signature package, and that's kind of an accepted additional thing. But is it the MSA, or is it a contract with a worker in a VMS, or is it a contract with a supplier for a statement of work in a services
Hmm.
procurement system? That's where, if from a product point of view, if you sort of say, oh, the Zivio product handles how you create a statement of work contract, somebody might say, well, we've already got a contract management tool. But that's where people miss the point. Ultimately,
Right.
it's so because and this is where you can get to the simplicity around what you were saying just a second ago and what I said earlier, which is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? So if the problem you're trying to solve is to bring a contract a worker and bring a worker on board, then that's going to be best done in a VMS and not in just Ariba, for example. If it's a SAP setup, you'll have Ariba at the top level doing your strategic sourcing, your MSAs, your suppliers and all that sort of thing. You're not going to do a contractor's engagement contract in Ariba. You're going to do it in Fieldglass. You're going to do it in the VMS. So so likewise, from a services procurement point of view or any other area, there are pathways that just need to be channeled through the correct platforms. So when people look at integrating systems, they can make it too disjointed. They can continue to have a disjointed process, or they can allow the system that is best for that particular outcome to deal with that particular pathway. So again, people think about using different systems, but ultimately it should just be different screens. If you're utilizing white label capabilities, if you're utilizing single sign-on, things like that, and a centralized, you talked about intake or triage. If you talk about centralized start points, you can then have different channels, different workflows, different screens where a user doesn't need to sign in because they're just using their single sign-on that they use anyway to just go straight into that screen that might be white labeled to look like every other type of screen that they're using, and they do what they need to do within the system, and then the system takes care of where that information goes. Reporting and things like that. It's not massively complicated to centralize reporting as long as you know what you want to report on. This is where things like BI dashboards and BI packages like Tableau, Sisense, Power BI, information can be centralized there from multiple systems, but it's obviously different companies are set up differently. So I think there are simpler ways to do things than people might think from the outset. But the worst case scenario is, people can't continue with situations where they just don't have a technology solution in place for things like services procurement, manual workarounds, just stopping people from getting things done quickly, making people go outside the process, causing compliance risk, all kinds of financial risk. It's just those companies, as I said earlier, they're not going to be able to compete effectively. They will just lose. So I think although it's a thorny issue, organizations do need to start addressing this. I mean, you mentioned friction killing adoption, where you get these kind of duplicative processes, manual processes, etc. And we talked about the desire for change and the adoption side of it, within the context of what people are trying to solve here. What examples have you seen of really good adoption in terms of how did the organization go about achieving good adoption for a technology solution that actually made a difference?
Yeah, some of the best implementations I've seen is the change management process started before the implementation ever did. They had sold the idea of what they were moving to before they had even bought a product, right? And there was just this idea of this is what we want to move to, and we all agree on this. We're clear on what the root cause of our problems are. We know what the value of solving that would be, and we're all bought in that this change is worth it. That takes a lot of time, right? But to have champions that are building that up before a solution is even selected, and we know that it exists, we're going to go out and do that. They've enabled the business to already vision visualize what this could be and how their lives could be made simpler and transformed. And it's funny, as providers, that's a little bit out of our control, although I'd always sell myself as a change architect, transformation architect for clients to help them come in and start visualizing what this could be before, it ever actually gets implemented. I think that's a key component because having a good idea of where you stand right now and what the future could be is a big deal. Because when you've probably approached this where you come in and you start selling, you're not selling, but you're trying to get the sale, you're trying to educate, generate value around what you're going to provide. But if they don't really know what the root cause of their problems are and be able to take stock of where that is and where things could go to in the future state, it's very hard to relate and I keep using the word visualize, but understand what that forward-looking approach would be and then what the value would be behind that. Because if you don't know truly what the problems and the root cause are, it's hard to establish that change management and the championing of these ideas, right, to push that forward into the business so that adoption, as you implement the system, it's incrementally, hey, we're doing this. Let's do some testing. Let's bring it to life for you. Let's start showing you how to do that. Let's start getting you trained on it. Change management, I think, is one of the utmost important things that honestly gets devalued and um, I'm trying to think of the right word. Deprioritized.
Yeah, it gets pushed to the bottom of the pile sometimes, doesn't it?
Right, but if I can't enable the business and the users that are going to do this, not just the exec that's going to do this, because the exec, yeah, they get it, but the people that are going to live and breathe this every day. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things. And it's funny because that all that existed before AI, before services procurement, before all of this. But we sometimes forget that we're humans and humans struggle with change as much as we say we embrace that. That is what I think is one of the important things. And then from that executive standpoint, them to be a champion of that. Because it's easy to get on board when it's like, oh, you know what? The CFOs, CPO, the CHRO, they're all in on this, man. And they're saying, join us on the boat. We're going for a cruise here, and it's going to be a good time because our life's going to be better. Um, that's a key piece. And I'm not saying you need to mandate everybody, this is what you're doing, like it or get out. But there needs to be, I think, rules and guidelines of we're doing this because XYZ value and ABC outcome that to us generates the real ROI and is going to make our lives better and our business stronger. I know all of that seems very, very basic, but some of the programs I've seen and been a part of, particularly with services procurement, having that vision from the outset and that buy-in just goes a long way because otherwise you're going to run into roadblocks and hiccups along the way. Don't get me wrong, you need to have your data, you need to have your contracts, you need to have everything fairly buttoned up. But I think a lot of that can come along the way. But in terms of adoption, you have to have that change mentality before the change even starts.